The data link layer will also do the error checking to see if the what is being transmitted is error free or not.
Okay, error checking. It's not exactly in data link layer, but okay. What else? Anyone else? What is the major problem we have seen in data link layer protocols? Can you name one data link layer protocol? Anyone else? Maybe Moinak has answered something. Anyone else?
Ma'am,
Yes.
I can try. Ethernet and Wi-Fi are actually this MAC address. This thing actually lie in the data link layer of the TCP/IP model.
Yes. So what problem actually we have seen in data link layer?
Frame drops.
Frame drop. Okay. I mean, what is the reason of that frame drop?
So, ma'am, there are several reasons like frame drop means due to some what I will say. See, actually, the what I will say from the source to target, if the packets are not reaching, and if there are certain problems in the channel or transmission channel, that kind of problems occurs. Means I mean that. Suppose Wi-Fi is there, na? So it works on UDP protocol. So
okay, forget about the Wi-Fi now. If Wi-Fi is there or not, still, what is the problem of whatever we have discussed in Ethernet? I mean, maybe take the question in this way, that whatever we discussed in traditional Ethernet, what is the problem that we identified, and for that we cannot. Can we first of all tell me? Can we adapt the traditional Ethernet? What is there to our embedded scenario? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Traditionally, whatever there in Ethernet, just same thing we can adapt in Ethernet. Embedded scenario.
We want a faster network and delivery, so some modifications are required. Not exactly completely the thing we will don't take it.
Yes. So for what is the pinpoint answer to the point that what is the limitation of Ethernet? Okay, I am going again. I mean, let me pose the question a different way. So, do you remember the MAC
yes.
problem, collision problem in Ethernet? So, can you tell me what is that?
Ma'am, it's like that. There's a channel, okay? So there are more than one transmitter, and they're using a common channel. And suppose two transmitters are transmitting the data, two or more are transmitting the data at the same point of time. Then there are crashes because they're using a common channel, and that leads to loss of data or frame drops in that way.
Exactly. So what is the main main functionality of data link layer? Like physical layer, we talked about, that is the bit level representation of data.
Yes.
And in data link layer, what is the main functionality? If one word anyone is asking you, what will you answer?
Ma'am, I think the thing is that to avoid these collisions, we have used several protocols like CSMA series and many other. So
that means media access control. In one term, that is so much time we are talking about this MAC word. Media access control protocols. I have a common shared bus with which different nodes are connected, and those nodes, if they are trying to transmit all of them, if they are trying to transmit at a time together, then what is the problem? There is a possibility of collision, and how we are going to handle this collision. For that, we have proposed different protocols like CSMA. We have considered one. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So anyone else? So what we have seen. So that what Akashit told, that exactly that Ethernet or the CSMA protocol we can take as it is in embedded networking. Is it correct? So you all are agreeing with that?
No, ma'am, we can't.
In CSMA CD, there is randomness, no, ma'am.
Okay, yes, correct. So see, in which part of CSMA CD is the randomness problem?
In peak and P and
persistent.
persistent.
Okay. And what
I
else? I mean, can you tell me, explain in a simpler way? If it's okay if you forgot the terms, it's fine, no problem. But can you tell me in which case this randomization is coming into picture?
in the left side also, ma'am. There will be some hold time, no, ma'am.
Pardon?
Something in left flowchart there will be. We should wait for some time and then
I
we
mean,
should.
for what? Left, right? I mean, for what purpose there is some wait time?
If
You are correct. You are telling in the correct way.
if we get a collision, then we will wait for some time, no, ma'am. TB time, that's something.
Yes, correct. Just let me explain a bit more. Maybe go through those, I mean, lectures once. Okay. So what we talked about, that whenever we are trying to avoid collision, what is the typical, I mean, direct solution? If you forget about the terms also, then also what is the typical solution? Then there are two stations. They will wait when they are trying to, they're checking that the bus is idle. Then only they can start the transmission. But the problem is, if two of the systems, two of the nodes, they are checking that all the bus is idle at the same time, and at the same time they are releasing their data to the bus, their message to the bus. Then again there will be a possibility of collision. Now to avoid this, some randomization concept is added to the algorithm. That means you will see that twice this randomization is added. One is a persistent method, that how many times that is the station is waiting and which way the station is, the waiting algorithm, and back of time computation. In both the cases, that means we have added some amount of randomization with the expectation that two stations, two nodes, when they are choosing any random number, of course there is a high probability that the two numbers will not be same, and that way twice we are adding those randomization to improve this probability. That's all. So this waiting, in case of waiting time, this randomization is incorporated to confirm that no two stations, they are going to release their message at the same time, right? Vamsi Krishna, right? Your name? Is it correct? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So what are the other protocols we have seen in MAC? Maybe someone else? For data link layer, whenever we have discussed that, for data link layer, we have talked about how we can avoid collision. How I have multiple stations, multiple nodes, they are interested to send the data. How we can allocate the channel or some time slot or something, so that will actually determine that will give them some deterministic approach, so that they can get hold on the bus and start the communication, right? So what are the protocols we have talked about, we have discussed in the with respect to data link layer? What else? Anybody?
Ma'am, we talked about the token passing protocol as well.
Correct. Can you explain a bit that in which case token pulsing is not so suitable? Or first, can you explain why token pulsing is, better if we compare that to the CSMA protocol?
Ma'am, so in the token passing protocol, which is basically a channel access method, a token is passed between nodes. So
You're Kaushiki, right? What's
yes,
your name? Okay, yeah.
And whichever node has the token, that node is authorized to communicate.
Yes.
So that way, I guess we are reducing the collisions as well, because only a particular node at a time will communicate.
Yes. And on top of it, direct Ethernet, on top of CSMS here, We are avoiding the randomness, necessity of. So that means this token passing method, it is providing, what is providing on top of randomness? Determinism.
Yeah.
Right? So determinism is something, it is a very important concept when we are talking about the embedded scenario, because that Mainak started telling that it requires, when we are talking about embedded scenario, CPS framework, IoT framework, real time. This term we use repeatedly. Real time means we have her deadline, also maybe we have particular deadline within which we have to complete this task. So for there, this introduction is of randomness, it is not very acceptable, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So can you tell me what may be the problem with this token passing? What is the limitation, or maybe what is the backside? Because whenever you are studying any algorithm, always try to understand what is the advantage for which we are trying to go for it, what is the disadvantage for which we are thinking about the next protocol. So always study in this way. So what is the limitation of that? So we have seen that for CSMA/CA, the randomization is a problem. Fine. Now we came to token passing. So for token passing, what is the problem? Is there any problem?
Ma'am, starvation may happen on.
Okay. Okay. Someone else is talking. Okay, Kaushiki, fine. So maybe someone else is talking. Yes. Who is there? Mahesh, maybe, right? Yes.
Ma'am, I was saying that starvation problem may exist because a node may held the token for a long time.
Okay. And for that also we have given a solution, discussed a solution, right? What was
Yes,
that?
for we can give time bounded. Yeah.
Exactly.
So a node can hold a token for a limited amount of time. Then a different node will have the token, and then it will transmit, and sequentially the token will pass to all the nodes.
Okay. Now again, when we are adding this time boundedness, so that is perfectly fine, or do you think there is some problem with that also? When we are adding this time boundedness to this token I'm passing algorithm, so what is the problem with that?
Maybe some nodes doesn't want to transmit, but it will have the token.
Exactly. So that means unnecessary holding of the token, and also if that is also not there, the token need to traverse all the nodes. They may not be, they are not interested to pass any data, transmit any data. Still, the token need to pass to those stations, and that will take some significant round time. Okay, so that is one limitation of token. Okay. So what else? What are the other data link layer protocols we have discussed? Channel handling protocols, maybe. We have talked about CSMA/CA. We have talked about token passing. What else? TDMA. Do you remember that we talked about? Time division multiple access. Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So someone else other than Amit, that what we mean by that TDMA?
A channel is allotted to a particular node to transmit. In that time only a node can transmit.
Channel is allocated.
I mean, a time
particular time slot. Yes.
Yeah, time slot.
Yes. So fine. So again, what is the problem with that? The advantage is that you understand maybe. Then when in for real-time embedded system, real-time requirement, because when we are talking about any CPS or embedded system framework, it is not that all messages are having those real-time requirements. So for those TDMA slots, we can add some priority associated with that also, along with that TDMA requirement, that we may assign more slots, more, I mean, what to say, for stations or nodes who are actually sending those real-time traffic, right? So what is the problem? What maybe the problem is with TDM? This is very similar to what we have talked about token passing on.
Ma'am, increased latency.
Yes, how? Correct.
Because we are allotting different time slots, say for different nodes, and it's not necessary that every node wants to communicate in that particular time slot.
Exactly. So unnecessary loss of some time slots, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Now, so now I think for others it is clear that data link layer, not only the frame communication, the main purpose of data link layer, whatever frames we are getting from physical layer, or if you think on the other way down from network layer, main purpose of data link layer is to allow a collision-free communication in a shared medium. So main functionality, one main functionality, and where we are concentrating our embedded requirement also, that is the medium access control. Okay. So after that, we talk about few other protocols, right? So that is how we are representing the message bits, and we are adding some extra overheads along with that. So when we are talking about this embedded communication, what are the different overheads we should, we should think of, or what are the overheads can come into picture? What type of overheads? Maybe we have talked about that, right? Someone? So Moinak, you told that we are forming that data frames. So when we are forming those data frames, few overheads are coming into picture. So what are they?
Like we have to add bits for error correction. We have to ensure we have to send acknowledgements.
Yes. So that is the what do you term them?
Start
that is the
stop
packet overhead, right? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And what are the other overhead we are going to consider? That is mostly related to data link layer itself. Someone else?
Ma'am, source address and destination address too.
But sources are correct. Those are getting added to the packet overhead. Okay. So that is the part of packet overhead. I'm asking about that. What else? What other type of overhead I should be concerned of? Someone? No one interested? Okay, I'm telling the answer. So the
Error control bits.
Error control bits, yes. Error control bits, source, destination address, acknowledgement requirement, everything. What are these all are related coming under packet overhead, right? So two types of overhead. What I was asking, the two types of overhead.
Stop bits.
Yes, start of why are they required? What are the usage of them, Naveen?
For synchronization.
Synchronization. Now, can you tell me? When we are telling that I'm going to avoid some. When we are avoiding that, where I am paying for that?
Ma'am, I could not hear you. Your voice was breaking.
Okay. Hello?
Yeah. Can you repeat?
Okay. Yes, I'm asking that whenever I'm telling that, see, when I'm discussing about packet overhead, and I'm telling that after discussing about media access overhead or media access protocols, we talked about this packet overhead, and there we have talked about different protocols, right? UART, I2C, all these protocols we have discussed. And there we have seen in some protocols, we are adding these type of bits, this like whatever you have mentioned, like start and stop bits for synchronization. Whenever we are adding them, that means we are adding some packet overhead, correct? But if we are removing them, that means we are reducing those packet overheads. But for that, we have to pay somewhere, right? Where are we paying to avoid that overhead? See, okay, I'm explaining in that
In
way.
receiver timing, we should have timing now.
Exactly. That means somewhere we are adding the clock, right? We are either adding the clock synchronization, and that is adding some overhead in my hardware. So somewhere we have to pay the cost. Either I'm paying that in terms of hardware. If that is supported, that is also application specific. The type of application I'm choosing, if I can support that, I can extra hardware or extra hardware resource, then in that case I can go for that clock synchronization, extra clock hardware for that. And if I cannot support that, then I can add the synchronization bits to the packets, and that way I can maintain the synchronization. So whenever you are actually reading those protocols, try to understand in this way. That you will see, otherwise those protocols are very similar. But whenever you will be observing those protocols, understand what are the overhead we are reducing in some protocols, and for which what added features actually we are adding extra. So these comparisons, only these differences are there in different protocols. So whenever you are actually comparing different protocols, reading different protocols, try to understand in this way. Okay. So there we can go through those URT, I2C. So there will be, I think, some slave concept, master concept, all those were there. So after that, what was the discussion that we started? After that, after data link layer, which is a layer? What is a layer? After that comes into picture. Think about a OSI model. That is network layer, right? So we have started about discussing about the embedded routing, right? Just we started about that, and when we are talking about routing, always remember that is related to network layer, because the main, like data link layer, the main functionality is the media access control within a LAN or local area network. Now when we are talking about networking, the basic concept is we are thinking about how multiple such LANs are getting connected. Now when multiple such LANs are getting connected, there is some connector, that is a router, and this router holds some algorithm that denotes that when one packet is coming out from a particular local area network, and it will be traversing a node that is distant, and that for that that packet should need to cover multiple LANs, need to hop multiple LANs. Then what is the best way to consider? What is the best way this packet should take to get transferred from one node to another node? And most of the cases, these nodes are present in different local area networks. So we have just started discussing in this part. Okay, that is embedded routing. Okay. Now, in case of TCP/IP scenario, what is the most prominent protocol for this routing purpose? Anyone? What are the most common protocols?
Ma'am, the internet layer.
Pardon?
Internet layer.
Okay. In TCP/IP, that is the layer, name of the layer. Okay. And what is the protocol in TCP/IP?
TCP is the protocol. No?
TCP is the protocol for what?
No, IP is the network protocol. TCP is transport layer protocol.
Actually, when I'm talking about TCP/IP protocol, what are the core of them? You both are correct. The main two protocols that forms the concept of TCP/IP is the TCP protocol and the IP protocol. But in networking layer, that IP protocol works. That denotes the source to destination node communication, and the transport layer communication actually for what? For what? The transport layer communication, what is the purpose of transport layer communication?
Transmission
Ma'am,
control.
it is a port number and ma'am,
Okay.
completely socket consists of an IP address and a port number. Okay. So in the TCP transport layer, it mainly deals with the port number at which port the data is to be transmitted, and it's related to that things.
Okay. And IP layer? For that, I mean IP protocol for node to node communication. Okay. Naveen was telling something. Yes, Naveen?
No, ma'am, I was talking about the transmission control in the
Transmission control. Yes. What does it mean by that? Transmission control?
Establishing connection between the source and the destination node, and it's like a handshake, the initial handshake.
Yes. For client to server, the initial handshake, and basically that is for synchronization. Correct?
Yes,
so that those two ports, they will be in sync, and then the data communication will take place between node to node, and then the port to port exact delivery which confirmed by by the port to port communication that is defined in transport layer, and the node to node communication that is defined in network layer. Now when you see this, now let's start our discussion today. So now I think it is clear. When we are talking about routing, embedded routing or routing, whatever it may be, we are always in the network layer. Whenever I will be telling that we are talking about media access control, collision, etc., we are in data link layer. When I will be talking about this port to port communication or some synchronization establishment between two ports, then we are in the transport layer. We will talk about application layer later. So just okay, so this is the main concept of TCP and IP. So there are two protocols. This is the one TCP connection establishment, and this is the IP connection. IP protocol, TCP and IP. They form the main main structure of TCP/IP and
protocol stack.
Yes, the protocol stack. And this is the IP protocol where you can see this is the source IP address and the destination IP address. These two are embedded in these IP packets, and then the actual data, then other fields are there, time to leave, how many times it will go. So in this header part, these main two inputs, main two fields are this source IP and destination IP, based on which this data communication takes place. These are some added informations and added added protections somewhere, some flags, some identification, some fragmentation information, all these things are there. And associated with that, then based on the source and IP address, this data communication takes place. Probably we also talked about that how this embedded communication or embedded networking or embedded routing is more closer to mobile ad hoc routing, right? So in mobile ad hoc routing, we talked about that, right? We just start talking about that. Okay, let me start from this. That is when we are talking about this routing is the process of forwarding the packets from source to destination. Okay, and along with that, see, one packet is coming to a router with this information about this source IP address and with this information that this is the destination IP address where this packet is intended to go, right? Now this is the connector, this is the router. The router is receiving this packet somewhere from some other nodes. And then this router is basically, there are different multiple options. And this maybe this packet based on this IP address, the router came to know it wants to go to some node N1. Okay. And there are multiple paths for this. Maybe this is one path, maybe this is one direct path, maybe some mode hopped path. So there are multiple paths. So which route to take, which can be the best route to send this packet, that is determined by this routing algorithm. Okay, that is this routing algorithm. You understand that this routing algorithm basically calculating the cost of all these paths, all these possible paths, and from there it is choosing the best possible path. Now we will see here when we are talking about best. This base is associated with some cost, and this cost varies depending on the application to application, depending on requirement to requirement. Now, for example, when we are talking about this base, in traditional networking scenario, maybe just what is the link cost? That means what is the length of this link or something related to that. Maybe that is from there we are actually calculating the cost. Maybe this is 2 to 3 to that way. Whatever link, what are the costs associated with the link. But when we are coming to this embedded scenario, the choice of how we are calculating this cost is different. Somewhere it is based on the type of nodes we are using. Like we will be talking about the sensor nodes. When we are talking about the sensor node, wireless sensor networks, because most of the time when we are talking about this embedded networking, we are associated with some sensor nodes. Now these sensor nodes, they have a critical feature, that is the time to live. They are associated with some energy, they are associated with some power. And of course, if you just adapt these traditional routing algorithms and you apply on them, it may happen while calculating the routing table itself, routing information itself, their energy is dying and it is nothing left to continue the overall network. Okay, so this how we are computing this base route, that varies application to application, domain to domain. Now other than that, these concepts are very similar, that we have two types of routing, that is adaptive and non-adaptive, where in adaptive routing, that is dynamic, and non-adaptive, that is very static. That means you are flooding. Flooding means every incoming packet is sent to all outgoing links. Okay, sorry, outgoing links. And the random walk means just this node is choosing a random path, and then it is again from getting to this node, and from this node to again it is choosing another random path. Okay, so these are the non-adaptive or static routing algorithms. But in general, what we prefer, that we do not, because if we do flooding means you can understand the deficit of it. That means every node, incoming node is receiving the packet, and if whatever outgoing link is present from that node, from this node, whatever links are present, to every node, it is basically sending the same packet. It is increasing the traffic within the network, I mean, in a huge way. And if we are applying this flooding technique directly, let's say to some sensor-based network, what will happen? Every node will receive this, it will process this, or then it will again route that packet to some other path. To do that, some significant energy will be lost. So whatever traditionally we are thinking as some algorithms may not be applicable to our embedded or network scenario. Okay. Now, in case of adaptive routing, of course, centralized, this we will discuss today. That is, centralized means compute the least cost path. That means we discuss that our purpose is to choose the base route. Base route means least cost path. That will be my best. And to compute that, we need to have the global knowledge. In isolation algorithm, we have the local knowledge, and in distributed algorithm, we have some least cost information in some distributed manner. So we will discuss these two today. This is this one in a bit detailed way. Then I think these terms will be clear to you. Okay. And on top of that, when we are talking about embedded networking, these type of features of mobile ad hoc network, they are the part of our, the concept. That means they are autonomously self-organized. These nodes are continuously changing. That is, there is no fixed topology. And this, due to this dynamic topology, we have to adapt this routing protocols also properly. Okay. Now maybe this we will come later. We will again talk about this. But first, to understand how this link-based routing actually is working. And also for wireless sensor network, this is about the one challenge in embedded networking, as we told, that the nodes are mobile. It's continuously changing. So no fixed topology in most of the cases. And in wireless sensor network, the sensors should transmit the measured data to some other data, so to some other data node, or to some base station. And that should be their energy of their battery would be used at minimum level. So if you just adapt algorithms, flooding type of algorithms, what will happen? You are just sending packets to every node. Then again, those packets, they are using their significant energy just to handle this flooding. Again, they are accepting this packet. Again, they are sending these packets that way. So I think that is not, you understand that is for sensor-based technology. This is not very much acceptable. Okay. So the wireless sensor network should be constrained to easily accommodate changes in the network. But you have to accommodate the changes, but they are constrained. So that is the problem. Okay. Now, but what is our main purpose when we are talking about embedded networking? We have to merge both the concepts. One concept is coming from MANET, that my topology is ad hoc. It is associated with some mobile nodes, and also they are added with some sensor nodes where energy is a typical concern. And we have to take care of those nodes, and we have to use those nodes efficiently so that we are not losing or wasting energy for any unnecessary purpose. For that, the best suited, according to the literature, is combination of this both. Some concept is coming from this MANET, and some combination is coming from the sensor network, and both the combinations are used heavily in embedded routing. So that's why, to understand that what are these concepts, we will discuss in detail the routing algorithms. One is coming from this MANET, that is the OLSR, optimized link state retrieval, or optimized link state routing. And one we will discuss about this WSN, wireless sensor network. That how we are considering the energy preservation, or we are trying to save energy when we are communicating between sensor based. Is it clear up to this part? So these are the main two challenges when we are talking about embedded routing. That of course we have to route. We have some source address and we have the destination address, and we have to send our packets from some source to some destination. That is fine. That is coming from the traditional requirement. But on top of that, our extra requirement is that my nodes are mobile. It is forming some mobile ad hoc network. Or the nodes are dynamically changing, constantly changing. And also maybe that to explain that we have taken one example of V2V communication last day, what I remember. And added to that, some nodes among them are associated with some sensors. So the heterogeneity is associated with this embedded networking concept. That's why we also need to adapt. We have to also merge, combine concepts from these two domains. Okay. So first, we'll talk a bit about what options we have in this managed routing protocol. Okay. In managed routing, there are two concepts. I mean, two routing algorithm development concepts. One is proactive and another is reactive. What do we mean by proactive? Proactive routing means it discovers the route and routes and set of routing tables where the data needs to be transmitted or not. That means it is proactive. It is ready as and when required, you can use them. It is whenever it is not in use, it is basically updating and creating its routing table so that when actual data comes into picture, they can actually take the help of that routing information and they can message can be get transferred from one node to another. So you can see in this diagram, there are different nodes, and these nodes are associating with information about the nodes and their next hop. Okay. So you can see these are the IPs associated with. So when this 10.1.1.0, that means there is maybe we can take that in the network that is maybe directly connected. Okay. For some other nodes, maybe this one 10.1.2.2. Okay. If one second, yes, this one 10.1.3.0. okay, for this node, so this node is not directly connected, so it is actually incorporating the information about the next hop. So this is one form of, this is just one example that how routing tables look like. This routing table actually holding the information. If this is starting from, this is your source node, this is your source node, and these are all your destination nodes. Where will your packet jump if it is appearing to this node? From this, where it will go first. So based on that, if it is directly connected, this router will transmit that packet to that particular link. If not, it will just send the packet to this next IP address space station. Next, that is its next hop. So that is the concept of hopped or multi-hop communication. Okay. Now, of course, you understand that whenever there is a routing requirement, these routing tables should be there. Only difference is when you are preparing this routing table. In case of proactive, in spite of the fact there is no communication requirement so far, still this router is well in advance preparing the routing table and storing it in its memory. Okay. Now comes the reactive protocol. which is like maybe some communication of those guys you heard about that ALAP protocol, right? As late as possible. So it only starts searching for a route when the devices have data packets to transmit. That means you understand that the initial delay, since this is ready, the overhead is initially you have to store this memory, maintain this routing table in the memory. But in reactive protocol, that is not a requirement. Whenever it is coming, the requirement is coming, then only you are storing or forming that data, forming that table. So this is having lower initial delay because the table is already formed. Okay. But what is the drawback? Usually it performs better when it is low mobility in the network. That means that mobility is less. Not so, your nodes are mobile, but not so mobile. In that case, whatever routing information you are storing in your routing table, you can use it repeatedly. Okay. But in case of mobile, very highly mobile platforms, highly mobile network communication requirements, what happens? Your nodes are continuously changing. That means this node initially was connected to initially with this router, maybe after some time it is getting connected here. So that means based on that, your routing table you need to update continuously, right? In that case, there is no meaning that you are previously, I mean, that is it is of very little use that you are initially creating the network table, routing table and storing it. So it is better to be reactive at that time whenever the data is coming, then only you are starting to develop your routing requirements. But of course, since the reactive protocol is totally on the go, to trust on that fully, of course, it will introduce some higher overhead compared to proactive routing protocols. So that's why we are actually following these proactive options, but we are trying to adapt the technique that it will be checking with some delay, after some delay, repeatedly after some interval, I should say, that each router will check and it will check whether it should rerun again its proactive routing protocol to update its routing table or not. Basically, it is after a certain interval, it is repeatedly running this algorithm to update its routing protocol. Okay. So what are the proactive options? That means we are focusing on the proactive options, but we also know that for change requirements, change mobile requirements, there is a requirement that these it is not that one time I'm creating any network, any node is actually creating its routing table, storing the next hop information, that's all. No, it should be updated regularly on a periodic basis. Okay. So that is the same thing. It was mentioned here. That is, when we are going for this proactive options, it is table-driven protocol. That means we are storing that table. Table-driven protocols establish the routing tables independent of the need to communicate. And the next one is the maintenance of the routing table can be done by periodic updates or by event-driven. That means initially in a proactive way, you are creating that routing table. But whenever, maybe by a periodic update or whenever any message communication requirement is coming, then you are rechecking whether you can actually follow that exactly the same routing table or not. So that way you are basically updating this routing requirement. Okay. The next one is when we are going for this proactive path, there are two known protocols. One is destination sequence distance vector, and next one is optimized link state routing protocol. Now we will mostly discuss this because this DSDV, that is the earliest routing protocol. This link state routing came out later. In DSDV, we talk about the routing algorithm selects for each packet the neighbor with minimal cost. Okay, that means if I go back here for this example, this router is actually storing information about all its neighbors. Maybe if this is a router, these are the neighbors, neighbor 1, neighbor 2, neighbor 3, and it is storing information about those neighbors. And whenever there is also the cost of these associated links. And whenever there is a requirement, it will just update this cost link or this node information, and based on that, it will maintain its routing information. But sometimes there is the limitation of DSDV is that it can form loops, okay, caused by stale or broken routes due to distributed nature. Maybe initially you are trusting that this link you will follow, but due to these broken loops, broken links, stale nodes, this link is not available. So this DSDV is directly not applicable with this high mobility scenario. Okay, because once you have computed this N1 as your neighbor, just think in the next moment maybe this link is not present, because maybe in case of vehicular scenario, maybe this is the nodes of a traffic light sensor, smart traffic light sensor, and these are the vehicles at a certain point, and then after some point this vehicle is moving here. Now this is the node, and maybe it is connected to some other nodes of the network. That means this link is broken. So whenever you are planning for any communication through these nodes, then that link is broken, and then DSCP will not directly work as it was planned. So our better choice in this scenario is this link state algorithm. First we will talk about that, and then we will talk about the optimization what we are following for that. Now this link state protocol is performed by every router. So what is the steps every router or every node is following? Every node constructs a map of the connectivity to the network. Okay, so basically it is not like exactly DSDV, which was actually storing the information about the nodes, the neighboring nodes. It is constructing a map of the whole network. Okay, showing which nodes are connected to other nodes. Okay, next one is that after it has completed the construction of this whole map, there will be some calculation of this next best logical path. Again, best logical path means this path should be associated with some cost, and we will be identifying from one node to other within this map what is the smallest cost, least cost path maybe. Okay. So two things we need to understand here. We need to understand in detail that how we are going to construct this path first, and second, once this path, the first is there how we are going to construct this map, because first we have to map. So we need to store every router, every node, they should have this map with them in some form. In that map, you have multiple nodes. The second question is how we are going to calculate the next best logical path. Okay. So then this best paths will then form each node's routing table. That is the routing table. That is the routing information. Based on that, whenever that destination request will come, that routing table will be followed. Okay. So what are the set of actions when we are going to implement this link set algorithm, or we are trying to realize this link state algorithm in practice. Creation of the states of the link by each node. Okay, that means to construct this map, we have to take some steps. That means first thing is that maybe this is my network. Okay, and all these nodes they are interested to construct this map. Okay. For that, to do that, every node should have the information about these other nodes. So every node should have the information about other nodes, and that is done by some kind of packet sharing that we call as link state packets. Okay, so that is the creation of the link state packets. Now once the packets are created, we will see what are the structures and the packets, how does those packets look like. That is the next question. The first question is, I have to some form of information that I will share to the other nodes, and those other nodes with those receiving those packets will understand, okay, this node exists. Okay. Next thing is the dissemination of LSPs, that means link state packets, to every other router. Now, when you are interested to give the same information to all the nodes, of course, the base choice is flooding. That means your one node is forming one packet, LSP packet, link state packet, and it is flooding that information to all the nodes. And with this packet, receiving this packet, all other nodes, they come to know, okay, these nodes exist. Okay. Once all the nodes, they are receiving information about all other nodes, then they will decide what is the shortest path tree for each node. From one source to one destination, what is the shortest path? And based on that, they will calculate that routing table. Okay, so we have to understand this step by step. Is it clear? Now you tell me one thing. When we are talking about link state packet, that one node is interested to broadcast. Flooding means one sort of broadcasting. I'm sending some news to everybody. The broadcast this information that these nodes exist. What can be the parameters of this link state packet? What can be the components or this field should be present in this link state packet? Anyone? What do you think?
The node ID.
Node ID, right? Anything else? Okay, fine. The main thing is the node ID. First thing is the node ID, you are correct. Sorry. Another node ID, correct. Next thing is the list of links, because when this node is receiving the information about this node, maybe node 1, node 2 is receiving about this node 1, it will form a tree from the connectivity links also. So for that, it is important to know what are the list of links. I mean, what are the links coming out from this or going in from or to this node number 1. From there, it can understand that what are the neighboring links, those are associated with this 1, 2 or any other node. So first thing is the node ID. Second one is the list of links associated with that node. Next one is a sequence number. Now you can see that node ID and this list of links, that will help to create the topology. Every node will understand what are the nodes present and how are they connected with the other nodes. That creates the topology, right? This next one is the sequence number. Sequence number means this link state protocol, how it works. like, see that initially when we talked about this proactive routing protocol, we mentioned that in spite of the fact we are creating the routing table initially before any data transmission request is coming into picture, but we have to update them periodically after certain interval. Now when I'm updating, when any node is sending some update information, maybe any node, they got a new link, okay, at that time it is trying to update the whole network that, see, I got a new link, so you need to update your topology. For that, it will send a new LSP that means new packet. Now the destination, maybe it is sending this information to this and this. Now how these nodes who were already previously connected to this node 1 will understand whether it is done, if these updates are in a very short duration, within a very short duration, how they will understand which one is the new information. Now to distinguish the new LSPs from the old ones, this sequence number is important. Okay. The next one is, the fourth one is the age. Age means prevent all LSPs from remaining in the domain for a long time. That means the one thing is that the sequence number directly updates the with the help of the sequence number, one node, maybe this is the node 2, it is receiving two LSP packets from this node 1. Maybe let's come here, node 5. This node 5 is receiving two LSP packets from node 1, LSP1 and LSP2. It may happen when this node 1, this node send this packet LSP, maybe this is the new packet and this is the, LSP2 is the new packet and LSP1 is the old packet. So when LSP1 it was sent, there was some network blockage or some delay associated with it. Hence, when this node 5 is receiving, this node is receiving this LSP1 and LSP2 together. This is one possibility. Or maybe with further delay, it is receiving this LSP1 after LSP2 due to the network congestion, or the path this LSP1 has taken got under some delay or something like that. So that means if there are two subsequent updates, these 5, there will be difficult to understand the which packet is to accept. Now that shows that is determined by the sequence number. Okay. Now this age, if the delay is huge and there are number of updates that was posted by this node number 1, that means there is no point to keep this LSP1 packet for very long time. So that's why some time associated with that is called the age of this packet, after which network automatically discard this packet and it will not deliver to its final nodes or all the nodes. The flooding will not get completed, because you see, if there is very repeated updates, and in this scenario, if all your packets they are remaining in your network for very long, then of course that will increase the traffic of your network in a huge way. Very high number of LSP packets itself, it will be there in your network, and that will also may enhance the blockage problem, the delay problem in your network. That's why the age is associated with every LSP packet, which prevents the old LSPs from remaining in the domain for a long time. Okay. So as we mentioned before, that this requirement of generating LSP packets, there happens twice. I mean, in two scenarios. One is very common, that is periodically all the nodes are sending this information to update the topology, or there's a change in the topology. That is, we mentioned as event driven. Some link, some extra node is getting added, change in the topology, and any node is basically broadcasting that information through, I mean, within the whole network. So this is the basic structure or basic components present in the link state packet. Okay. Now after this link state packet, what we will do, that if we all node will flood that packet not only to their neighbors, it will flood throughout the network. Okay. A node that receives an LSP compares it with the copy it may already have. Why this comparison is necessary? That is for this sequence number. It will check this sequence number and it will check if it is a new one. Then it will, if newly arrived packet LSP is older than the one it has, it can get that information by checking the sequence number. It discards the LSP, otherwise it updates the topology information. Okay, so this is the thing. Okay, next one is this one important. Now somewhere we have to stop this flooding. Okay. Now flooding means, again, all these nodes are connected. This node is sending a packet. It is not sending to this, it is sending to every node. Again, this node is receiving this packet. Sorry, it is again sending every node to every node. Now somehow there should be some mechanism to stop this flooding technique. So this is that it sends a copy of it out of each interface except the one from which the packet had arrived. This guarantees the flooding stops somewhere in the domain where a node has only one interface. That means you are having these type of connected nodes. So this node is basically again flooding that message, sending that message to all its neighbors except this one. Not only to its neighbors, to all other nodes except to these one, because from these nodes it has received this message. Other than this, all the nodes are receiving this message. And when this message is, is getting delivered to this type of node, maybe if we think about the tree, it is at the bottom nodes. So in those bottom nodes, there's no more child to deliver those packets, no more link to deliver. There is no more interface to deliver. So there, this flooding stops. So this way, these LSP packets get flooded to the whole network, and from this, the information, every node is getting the information, what are the present nodes, what are the nodes present at that point of time in the network, and how they are connected to their neighbors, what are the links associated with them. So is it clear? So that means now they are well equipped to form the map, to understand the whole topology of the network, to form the map of the network. Okay, is it clear? Is it clear?
Ma'am, I have a doubt.
Yes.
I could not understand the usage of this sequence number, because if we already have an age associated with the packet, then I think it is sufficient for a node to decide if the packet coming to it is the new one or the older one. So why do we exactly need that sequence?
Okay, I will go back. See, there are two purposes. It is not that sequence number and age is not the same. Sequence number means when this node 5 is receiving this LSP1 and LSP2 both. Okay, It is checking the sequence number of both and it is checking that LSP2 is having a more advanced, maybe more new updated sequence number, maybe whatever protocol they follow. It is greater sequence number or lesser sequence number, I don't know, but that updated sequence number, then it accepts the LSP2 and discusses LSP1. This is clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, in case of age, what happens? Let's say, this is your network. Okay, you are flooding, it is going on. Network is huge. Maybe that you can understand. And flooding is going on. Now, it may happen, there is some delay and one LSP where it is undergone due to some congestion or some huge delay, it could not reach to this number 5. It is in this intermediate node. Okay. In this intermediate node, now when this node is checking, that node will flood that packet. Ideally, for LSP flooding requirement, this node will flood that packet to the next node. Correct? But when this node is just checking this LSP packet to flood it to the next node, it is checking the edge. If that edge is, this is a too old packet that is present in this network for a long time, then this node can decide that no need to flood it once again to the next node and no need to increase the burden of the network. Okay, because from that edge, that edge is actually designed or defined in such a way that, of course, if there is some sequence, modified sequence number, some new LSP packet with modified sequence number that would have come, that already reached by some other flooding technique. But because when you are flooding this, you are getting the point, right? This packet is coming from this way, this way, this way. Again, the same packet is also coming from this way, this way, this way, and so on. So that means some other path, that same information has already reached to the other destination nodes. So no point against flooding this same packet to the next node. So that way this flooding gets stopped with this information of aging. Okay, it is not about accepting. It is about taking the decision whether I should again flood it to the next node or not. Whether it is really important for the next node, because this is a very old information and maybe that is not required. Okay, clear?
Yes, ma'am.
So that way, to take the aging, flooding decision, this age is important. Okay. Next one is, so next we understood the link state package. What we have, we understood about the flooding information. Next, all the nodes, they have received the LSPs and they have the copy of the whole topology. That means they have now this sort, they can know whatever information they have, from there they can actually form this type of graph. That means they have the node information present in the network and also the links associated with them. Maybe the associated costs are also given with that. So that from those information, they can actually form a graph. That map means a graph-like representation of those nodes and links. Okay, and on top of this node and link, some shortest path. They need to find out the shortest path from one source node to another destination node, and that information they are going to store as their routing information. Okay, and the Dijkstra algorithm is one of the common algorithm that creates the shortest path tree. Okay, so we will see this how this Dijkstra works. So our target is now to find a path between any source, between a source and the destination that has the least cost. That means to find a path of least cost. Okay. So these are the steps of Dijkstra where we are computing the least cost path. It is an iterative algorithm. And for that, we will see this term, that is DV is the cost of the least cost path from source to destination when we are choosing a particular destination. PV is the previous node of V along with least cost path and set of nodes to which the least cost path is found. We will see one example, then I think this talk will be clear. So see, this is the example of Dijkstra where we have chosen the source node U, and finally we will go up to this Z. Okay. So for the source node U, we are this n dash, this is, we are just storing the set of nodes we have just considered. Okay. DV, this is the destination node. Okay. And see, so from U to when the destination node is V, then we are first computing the distance. This is the 2, and the previous node we are storing, that is U. So that means from U to V, if you see this network, this topology, from V, there the immediate previous node, we have the previous node as U. Otherwise, we have to go for a hopping, considering the intermediate nodes. Next, we are considering the next node, that is UX. Okay. Okay. Before that, we will check everything. This is the V. This is for W. Now you see the distance between W and V. This is a 5. That means one direct path exists between U and W. So the distance is 5 and the previous node is again U. Okay. Now for X, previous node again exists as U because there is already a direct path and the distance is 1. Okay. Now for Y and for Z, we can see there is no direct path and we have not incorporated any intermediate node. In our node Z n dash, now we have only one single node U. Correct? That means my from U to Y, the distance is, we are just putting at infinity, and my previous node is also not mentioned because there is no previous path, there is no defined or set path. Okay. Same for Z also. Next, come to this point. This is for when I'm incorporating the next node. Now, how I'm going to choose the next node, my next neighbor? Now, from U to Y, V and W, V, W and X. These are the three possibilities, three possible neighbors that I can incorporate. Among them, we are choosing the shortest, the neighbor with the shortest cost. Here, the shortest cost associated with my path. That means U to X, that is the shortest cost associated. That's why we are incorporating the next node as X. So that means UX. Now, if I am incorporating X in my node set, this U to V distance, that remains same. See, there is no change. It is still UV. Previous node is still U and the distance is 2. Next, we are going to W, considering W. For W, whether if we are adding this X as intermediate node, now the U to W distance is 3 plus 1, 4. And this is lesser than our previous distance 5. That's why while incorporating X, we are updating this distance from U to W Now the new distance is 4 and my previous node is x. Okay. Next, we are considering x. Of course, x is direct path that we already taken. That is, the previous node is u and the cost of the path associated is 1. Okay. Next is y. Now we can see one path is established from u to y due to the incorporation of this intermediate node x. Here the total cost is 2 and the previous node is x. Similarly, there is now we are checking for z, but still now there is no path associated that from u to direct or indirect. No path is present from u to z. So for that, just check this next example where you are similar way you are incorporating the next. Now you have this path ux. Now you are searching between all the neighbors from x. So all the path costs from x. So now what are the options? From x to v 2, x to w 3 and x to y 1. So of course we will be considering the least cost path. That means we will be considering this path 1. So my next node incorporated to my node list will be y, and based on that, the similar way the path length, the path cost will be updated. See, for v there is no change. For w again there is a change because 1 plus 1 plus 1. Now there is a path with cost 3. Okay. For u there is no change, nothing. For y 1 plus 1 2 the same length. For z now we are getting a path this way. That means 1 plus 1 plus 2. That is the cost of the path. Okay. That way we are traversing all the nodes. Here we are again checking when we have incorporated y, then we are checking the next nodes, next neighbors of y. We are next incorporating v. Sorry, one thing. uxy. Okay. ux ux, then we have incorporated ux, then it should be ux, should be why did we okay. One second. One second. DV after the getting the list. TPS node set nodes. Okay. UXV. XY. Okay. After that, the next node will be UXY. Okay. It should be UXY and VYV. UXYV. 2, 3, 4. Okay, this is maybe this length. Okay, they are considering. Oh, yes. Okay, now the next path updated is V, and then they are considering this path UXYV and associated with that UXYV W and no change, and then they will consider this Z. Okay. Okay, this part I will check and clear. Okay, next day. How this V is coming? V that should come next to Z, I think. And next is Z. Maybe that way arrangement is not. Okay, this way they are updating. I will clear this part. I feel that after that this Z will be incorporated because Y I mean neighbors will get in anyway. It will give the same result. It will not change anything. After Y, it will actually check for their neighbors and it will incorporate those weights and the node will update it, and after that it will go for the next immediate nodes for V and W. Okay, that way it will update. This part I will clear next day. Okay, why this V is first and not Z? Before Z should come and okay, this part I will clear next. But anyway, this way we are in Dijkstra algorithm. It is forming the tree by at each level. It is incorporating the relative cost and checking whether the total cost from one node to another, whether it is lesser than the previous cost or not. Ideally, what I think, it should ux y, then it will consider z, then it will consider this v, and then it will consider w. This way this should proceed. Yes.
Ma'am, instead of uxy, why wasn't it uxv? Because v was the next node nearest to the source, right?
uxy, yes, that's why that I mean nearest to source. No, first see ux. Okay, ux is 1. Okay, from x, now we are considering this path ux, then we are considering uxy. Yes, either
Why not
they should.
v, ma'am?
Yes, that's why I was thinking from where you are telling this. The next node is 2, right? I mean with the cost 2 and 5. So next should be V. And I was also thinking if they are following this path, like from next node, if they are now considering the least cost, then after this Y should be 1, and then they should incorporate W, and then it will go for this Y and then Z, right? Either one of them should be there. This part I will check. Okay, what I was thinking, uxy, up to that it is okay. Ux, then they are considering their next least cost path, that is uxy, that is 1. That's why they have incorporated y. If that is so, then after that they should consider w, not v again, right? I mean, one convention they should follow. This part I will check. You are telling from here from u to x, then u to v. No, that will not happen because u to x, they are taking the least cost. Then ux, then again they are considering the next path. Wait, u to x, they are taking 2, 5. It's okay.
Ma'am, even if after x we take v into consideration, the
yes, sir,
total distance or the cost would be 3. And from u to v, we directly have 2. And that's why I think they haven't taken it as uxv. Because we need to discard it. We have to keep the shortest path.
No, you are telling about, see, for this, right? For which one? For this X?
Ma'am, for the V1, like after UX, there is no use of taking V.
V, yes.
Someone is asking, right? So, because we will get the cost as 3 in this case, if we choose the path UXV. Whereas if the path is directly UV, the cost is 2. So that case will be discarded.
Okay, maybe that way. Yeah. That may be the case. Maybe that part, I mean, that layer, I mean, that's still skipped, right? I mean, they have not shown here. That's the way. That is the thing.
After Y, they should not go to V because V is not connected to Y.
No, not after Y. I'm telling about that V incorporation. They have not shown here. Maybe that is that part is skipped. That layer, yes, that is skipped. They have not shown here. That is because that is not getting any update, or that is this part is not getting. That's why they are not. They're skipping. Okay. So U2 that way, yes. So now the next one is V. But my question is UXY. Okay. After that, why they are incorporating V? Should it be there?
Ma'am,
I don't think so.
So because we check for the neighboring nodes, right?
Yes, that the V should not come here, right?
Should be W or Z.
W or Z, exactly. That's what I was thinking, that it should be UXYW, not V here. But I will check this and then I will confirm whether if there is maybe there is no update due to with the incorporation of W. That's why they left it here or not. This step I will calculate and I will explain it to you. But what I think here, this V will not come. It should come first. Should be checked with W, then ideally, because from Y to W the length is 1 and Y to Z the length is 2. So the W should be incorporated. Anyway, this example I will calculate again and share with you all. Okay, because I think I'm not clear why V is taken. Okay, so this is the basic concept of Dijkstra, where we are incorporating one neighboring node at a time, and we are forming this. We are checking whether because after all we are just trying to get this shortest path tree, and this tree should incorporate all the nodes. Okay, and with those nodes also with the associated distance and the previous nodes, this information we are storing. Now this finally our forwarding table that we will store as a routing information, that should be like this, where we are having those destinations. So for any node, the next link is information of the link is provided. Like for V, if the V is the destination, then it is a direct link U to V. But for X, for X also, not but for X also, that is a direct link U to X. And for Y also, for Y, the previous node is U, the forwarding path is U to X. That means there is no direct link, and the next forwarding link we are just storing in our routing table, and so on. So for the W also, we have calculated the next forwarding link is UX. For Z also, this is UX. Okay. So these forwarding links, those are calculated. I mean, those are with the formation of this shortest path tree. This table is formed, and that is kept as a routing information in your node. That is your routing information in your. That is the shortest path information. That if you forward your message to this next forwarding link, then it will, from the information also stored in the next your router or next node, it will follow the shortest path. So that is the concept. Next, so this was whatever we explained, that is the link state protocol. Okay. In case of optimized link state protocol, there is a small change compared to this classical link state protocol, where the protocol introduced the concept of multi-point relays. That is, we call it MPR. MPR means, in a straightforward way, the concept is that you are not allowing all the, because if you remember the flooding technique of link set, classical link set protocol, then all the nodes were actually flooding the information to the network. But here, some relay points, some particular nodes, they are identified. They send some communicating message that we term as hello message, that is a communicating message, and discovers two neighbor information. That means two hop neighbors, and elects multi-point relays from there. So this protocol is associated with another next level protocol which identifies these relay points. Okay. And with these relay points, they are only allowed to broadcast their message during the flooding process. Okay. So of course you can understand with this optimization, with this identification of relay point, that substantially that reduces the message overhead compared to the classical flooding mechanism. So this is the concept of optimized link state retrieval, what we generally use in our embedded scenario, embedded networking, along with some added clustering technique that we consider from our wireless sensor network concept. So when we are talking about this optimizations, that means it's generated only by nodes selected as MPers, that is the relay points. They will flood. That means they are actually reducing the control messages flooded in the network, and this MPer node may choose to report only links between itself and the MPer selectors. That means these MPers, other than broadcasting, they are having separate communication between the node selector. That means this node is going to hop and they are selecting some MPers. Now these MPers, they have, for link establishment or other communication requirement, they just communicate their MPer selectors. Okay. So these are the optimizations that provided, that is one single optimization, that is selection of MPer, that do not allow all the nodes to flood, just allow few selected nodes, term them MPer, and then allow them to flood. That means based on that, we are actually reducing the traffic flooding requirement within the whole network. Okay. Now this is about the concept of link state routing, where we are going for two steps. One is the creation of the map, that is done by the LPR packets, and then flooding, and then creation of the least cost tree associated with your path cost, and that is done by Dijkstra, where in Dijkstra, in every state, we are considering the least cost neighbor, we are incorporating them in the node set, and we are checking for all other nodes whether the path cost is improving or not. So that way we are basically forming the tree, and that checking is done for all the nodes because we are forming the node tree. So we have to make sure that we have considered all the nodes present in the graph, in the map. Okay. So this is the concept of Manet. I mean, this is the concept we are taking from Manet. Next, we will be starting this routing options, that is coming from routing concept, that hierarchical concept, hierarchical routing and energy preserving routing, that will take from wireless sensor network, and combination of these two, they generally useful in this embedded scenario. Okay. So I will not start the whole algorithm today, just to give the idea that what are routing options we have. One is the hierarchical routing, that we will take in detail next day. But as the name suggests, you can understand that the nodes or sensors you have arranged in hierarchy, and under some certain clusters, under the supervision of some cluster heads, and we will check what are the importance of them. Next one is, so far we have talked about the whatever routing algorithm, or whenever we are forming the tree, least cost tree, there we have considered only the path cost. But in embedded scenario, as I told before, that this cost is not always only the path cost or the length of the path or something like that. Sometimes it is data centric routing, that is, it focuses on the routing on the sensor data, how many data you have to pass, and based on that, these routing techniques, they improve. Another one is location routing, where you will consider as a cost, you will consider that the energy consumption, the location, the distance. For that, you have to do the data aggregation and delay associated with it, all these things. And finally, this quality of service over routing, where this quality is very application specific. Some particular application, they demand some quality should be associated with their routing protocol, and that you need to incorporate as your routing cost. Okay, like here one example is given, the surveillance application, where this routing protocol should have some consistency of delay. So that is the requirement, and the reliability and data loss, or data aggregation, and for energy handling, for that, all this can come under quality of service. So these, whatever parameter you are choosing, maybe that is adding, or that is actually forming the cost of your routing protocol. But after that, after you have decided the cost, the whatever concept you are using, that is same whatever we have seen in MANET, along with what we will see the next day in our hierarchical routing. Okay, so that for that we will actually discuss this low energy adaptive clustering, but that maybe we will start today, because now we cannot finish. Okay, so that's all for today. In sensor based routing, we will mostly discuss what is the advantage when we are going for hierarchy. Along with that, what is the advantage when we are introducing the concept of clustering. Okay, that we will discuss next day. Fine. Go through this example. I will clear to you. This Daisha. I have some doubts. Okay, so do you have any doubts so far?
Ma'am, I think that Dijkstra sequence, that is right. We were missing a part.
Yeah, okay. I will check with that. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay, I will check with that. I think it's I will check, do it once again, step by step. And I will check with that. Okay. Rest, other than that, is there any question? If not, it's done. So one announcement that tomorrow there will be no class. Okay. So what I was thinking, 26, I know that is your holiday, maybe next Tuesday, but can I just take 1 hour class? We will see some demo actually, not exactly any theoretical class. Is it okay for all of you in the same time?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, then okay, fine, right? So next Tuesday, the same time, only 1 hour class I will take. Tomorrow there will be no class. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.